Across Australia, there are cases that have never been solved, files that remain open. Decades later, families still waiting for answers that may never come. From children who vanished without a trace on a summer afternoon to a man found lifeless on a beach, his identity a mystery for more than 70 years. These are the stories that shaped Australia's true crime history. Each case has been investigated, reinvestigated, and debated for generations. But the same questions remain. Who was responsible? Why did it happen? And how have these mysteries stayed unsolved for so long? This is Australia's most infamous cold cases. 5 stories that defined a nation's fear and continue to haunt its collective memory. Before we begin, let us know where you're watching from and what time it is right now in your part of the world. It helps us see how far these stories reach and how many of you still care about the truth. If you haven't already, subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss future investigations like this one. Now, let's start with one of the most haunting disappearances in Australian history, the Beaumont Children. The Beaumont Children, Adelaide, South Australia, 1966. On 26 January 1966, the bright Australia Day sun hung high over Glenelg Beach in Adelaide, South Australia. 3 siblings, Jane, 9, Arna, 7, and Grant, 4, Beaumont, caught a short bus ride from their home in Somerton Park to spend the morning at the beach. They never returned. Their disappearance became one of the most haunting unsolved cases in Australian history. That morning began like countless others. The Beaumonts were an ordinary suburban family. Their father, Jim, a taxi driver and former serviceman, their mother, Nancy, a homemaker. It was a time when Australian children still roamed freely, and a quick trip to the beach was seen as harmless. The children left around 8:45 a.m., catching the local bus to Glenelg, a trip that took less than 10 minutes. Witnesses later saw them near the shoreline, laughing and playing. At about 11 o'clock a.m., a bakery owner recalled selling them meat pies and pasties. Oddly, they paid with a £1 note, though their mother had given them only small change for bus fare. Several beachgoers also reported seeing the children in the company of a tall, fair-haired man wearing blue swimming trunks. He seemed friendly, playing with them in the shallows, and later helping them pack their belongings. By 2 p.m., the children still hadn't returned. Their mother waited for the next bus, then the next one. By late afternoon, panic set in. When Jim arrived home from work, the police were called, and within hours the search began. Authorities launched one of the largest missing persons operations in the nation's history. Police, volunteers, and soldiers combed beaches, sand dunes, drains, and nearby streets. The Patawalonga boat haven was drained after reports the children had been seen there that evening, but nothing surfaced. Despite the exhaustive effort, not a single trace of Jane, Arna, or Grant was found. Over the following days, more sightings trickled in. A postman claimed he saw the children around 3 p.m., still together, walking along Jetty Road, apparently cheerful. But the lead went nowhere. With no bodies, no suspects, and no evidence of foul play, investigators were left with nothing concrete to follow. In the years that followed, detectives pursued hundreds of tips. Several suspects emerged, each bringing a new wave of hope and disappointment. One of the earliest serious persons of interest was Harry Phipps, a wealthy factory owner who lived near Glenelg. His estranged son later alleged that his father resembled the man seen with the children and that he'd seen them in Phipps's yard that day. Phipps was also known for handing out £1 notes to local children, a detail that matched the bakery account. Police searched a former property linked to him decades later, but found nothing to confirm the claim. Another long-standing theory pointed to Bevan Spencer von Einem, a convicted child killer active in Adelaide during the 1970s and 1980s. While his crimes shared disturbing similarities, no evidence has ever connected him to the Beaumont case. Over the years, the investigation repeatedly returned to a former industrial site in North Plympton, the old Castalloy factory, once owned by Phipps. Police excavated the grounds in both 2018 and 2025 after new information suggested the children might have been buried there. Thousands of tons of soil were removed, but again, no remains were discovered. Each unsuccessful dig, each new theory, only deepened the mystery. The Beaumont case changed Australia. Before 1966, it was normal for children to travel alone, even take public transport to the beach. After the Beaumonts vanished, that trust evaporated. Parents became vigilant, and a national sense of innocence was lost. Media coverage never stopped. Every few years, a new lead reignites interest. A confession, a letter, or a supposed witness who comes forward decades later. Yet all have proven false or inconclusive. Nancy Beaumont passed away in 2019, aged 92. Jim Beaumont followed in 2023, aged 97. They lived their entire lives without answers, clinging to hope that one day someone would speak up. Their case file remains open within South Australia Police, and a reward is still offered for credible information. For investigators and the public alike, the same questions remain. What happened to the Beaumont children? Who was the man seen with them that morning? And how could 3 children vanish in broad daylight on one of the busiest beaches in the country, without leaving a single clue? Decades later, modern forensic science, ground-penetrating radar, and DNA analysis have all been brought to bear. Still, nothing. No clothing, no remains, no confirmed suspect. The Beaumont mystery is more than a cold case. It's a national scar, a story passed down through generations. It reminds us how quickly normal life can fracture, how fragile the sense of safety once was. Nearly 60 years later, the truth remains buried somewhere beneath layers of rumor, time, and silence. The children are still missing, and the search continues. The Wanda Beach Murders, Sydney, New South Wales, 1965. On 11 January 1965, 2 15-year-old girls, Marion Schmidt and Christine Sharrock, walked into the sand dunes at Wanda Beach, south of Sydney. The next morning, their bodies were found partially buried in the sand, marking the beginning of one of Australia's most haunting unsolved murders. It was the height of summer. The temperature climbed past 40 degrees as Sydney's beaches filled with families escaping the heat. Marianne and Christine had spent the morning caring for Marianne's younger brothers and sister. After lunch, the girls decided to walk a short distance to collect their bags and return for a swim. They never came back. When the younger children realized the girls weren't returning, they grew frightened. With help from a nearby family, the children boarded the train back to their home in West Ryde. Later that evening, Christine's grandmother reported both girls missing. At 8 a.m. the next morning, a local man walking through the dunes discovered what he thought was a mannequin in the sand. When he brushed away the grit, he realized it was the body of a young girl. A few meters away lay another. Both victims were found about 250 meters north of the Wanda Surf Club, in an area shielded by dunes and grass. Police arrived within minutes, and the quiet beach was transformed into a major crime scene. Forensic officers quickly confirmed both girls had been killed with a knife-like weapon. Christine had suffered massive head trauma in addition to multiple stab wounds. Marianne's throat had been cut. Both had been dragged several meters through the sand before being partially covered. Their belongings were scattered nearby. A small amount of semen was recovered at the scene, suggesting a sexual motive. The weapon was never found. Police immediately launched what was, at the time, the largest homicide investigation in New South Wales history. Dozens of detectives canvassed the area, searching for witnesses who might have seen the girls that afternoon. Early leads described a tall, fair-haired man walking with the girls toward the dunes. One witness recalled them appearing as if they were being followed. Another claimed the man had been seen watching them earlier near the surf club. By the end of that week, investigators had taken hundreds of statements and gathered physical evidence, footprints, cigarette butts, and a towel, but none could be linked to a suspect. The intense summer winds had erased much of the scene overnight. To understand how the girls ended up there, detectives retraced their steps. Both teenagers were close friends who lived on the same street in West Ryde. Marianne's family had emigrated from West Germany in 1958 and often visited the beaches during summer. Christine, whose father had died years earlier, was being raised by her grandparents. On that Monday morning, they had taken a train from Sydney's inner suburbs to Cronulla, then walked to Wanda Beach. The area was popular with families, yet its wide dunes also offered seclusion and danger. As the investigation widened, police questioned thousands of people. Within months, more than 7,000 interviews had been conducted and over 2,000 statements collected. The reward, initially set at £5,000, was soon doubled to £10,000, an extraordinary figure for 1965. Despite the enormous effort, not a single arrest was made. In the absence of leads, detectives explored potential links to other crimes. Some noted similarities to later disappearances, such as the Beaumont Children in South Australia, suggesting the possibility of a traveling predator. Others focused on individuals already in custody for violent offenses. One of the strongest persons of interest was Derek Percy, a convicted child killer later imprisoned in Victoria. Percy had been in Sydney at the time and was known for violent, sadistic behavior toward young victims. However, no forensic evidence or confession ever tied him directly to the Wanda Beach killings. Percy died in prison in 2013. Another name that occasionally surfaces is Christopher Wilder, who later became a serial offender in the United States. Though a composite sketch loosely resembled him, there is no factual basis connecting Wilder to the 1965 murders. Through the 1970s and 1980s, advances in forensic testing raised new hopes. Investigators revisited the physical evidence stored from the original case, including clothing and biological samples. But much of it had degraded in storage. In 2012, the Nisavdag's cold case unit revealed that a partial male DNA profile had been extracted from semen found on Christine's shorts. The sample, however, was too weak for identification and could not be matched to any existing database. Despite decades of work, the murders remain officially unsolved. For the families, the pain has never faded. Marianne's younger brother, Hans Schmidt, who was on the beach that day, has spent his adult life appealing for new information. In recent interviews, he described the silence of the dunes, how they seem unchanged, almost frozen in time, and said, "I still hope before I die, I'll know who did this." The Wanda Beach murders shook Australia to its core. It was the first time a major homicide involving teenagers had taken place in such a public, family-oriented setting. For many, it symbolized a loss of innocence, a sudden realization that even the safest places could harbor danger. Media coverage was relentless, and the phrase Wanda Beach became synonymous with mystery and fear. Police continue to hold the case open. Each anniversary brings new appeals, new theories, and the same unanswered questions. Who was the man seen walking with the girls? Why were they targeted? And how could such a brutal act take place in broad daylight without a single witness seeing the moment it happened? Today, the sand dunes of Wanda remain eerily unchanged. The wind still reshapes the ridges each day, erasing footprints just as it did in 1965. The evidence may be gone, but the memory endures, a chilling reminder of 2 young lives cut short and a killer who has never been found. They went for a summer swim, but someone was waiting in the dunes. Mr. Cruel, Melbourne, Victoria, late 1980s, early 1990s. On a summer night in Melbourne, somewhere in the late 1980s, a masked intruder broke quietly into a suburban home, hijacked the lives of a child and her family, and vanished before he could be caught. This was the beginning of what police would later recognize as the attacks attributed to a predator they called Mr. Cruel. The first widely acknowledged incident took place in December 1988, when a man wearing a balaclava entered the home of the Wills family in Ringwood, Victoria. He tied up the parents, abducted their 10-year-old daughter, and carried her away. After approximately 18 hours, she was released, traumatized, unharmed physically, but forever changed. This pattern of home invasion, abduction, meticulous control, and release would define Mr. Cruel's method. From the outset, the suspect showed extraordinary planning and adaptability. Witness accounts described a man who spoke in a calm, measured voice, wore a distinctive dark balaclava with white stitching around the eyes and mouth, and left almost no usable forensic trace. Investigators found himself facing a predator who appeared to have knowledge of surveillance, counterforensics, and victim psychology. To understand how this predator emerged, we turn back to the social context and early life of his victims. The late 1980s in Melbourne was a time of suburban expansion, of families feeling safe inside their homes. Schools, streets, and parks seemed secure. But Mr. Cruel's crimes shattered that assumption. His victims ranged from children to early teenagers, often targeted during homes alone at night. One prime victim, 13-year-old Carmine Chan, was taken from her Templestowe home in April 1991 and later found dead. The timeline of confirmed attacks is chilling. In late 1988, the Ringwood abduction occurred. In July 1990, 13-year-old Nicola Linus was tacky. Despite the enormous scale of the investigation, no definitive suspect was ever charged. Investigators noted troubling complications. Many critical pieces of evidence had degraded, some had vanished altogether, and the offender had covered his tracks with sophistication. One senior detective reflected that the suspect might have been someone with police, forensic, or technical knowledge, given the professionalism of the crimes. The modus operandi gave investigators significant clues. Victims described being cleansed, sometimes even showered by the perpetrator, being held for set periods, one for 18 hours, another for 50, and in each case the families were threatened with knives or firearms. The suspect disabled alarms and phone lines, surveilled the home in advance, and selected victims in secure neighborhoods. He left no fingerprints, no usable DNA at first, and no identification. Reportedly, he kept souvenirs, potential videos or photographs, which he may still be using. Yet the investigation's biggest blow came when forensic advances failed to deliver a breakthrough. In the 2010s, authorities re-examined stored evidence, but found key items missing or degraded. In December 2010, the revised investigation known as the Apollo Task Force reviewed the case files, noting many issues that hampered progress. Suspects have emerged over time, including university lecturers, photographic professionals, and others with technical backgrounds, but none have been publicly charged. A dossier released in April 2016 listed 7 suspects who could not be eliminated, yet investigators still warned, the person who committed these crimes is in our society, holding a job, walking past you. The legacy of Mr. Cruel has left an indelible mark on Australian society. The terror he brought to suburban Melbourne forced parents to rethink safety, triggered national media headlines, and created enduring anxiety in communities that once felt secure. Locks were changed, alarm systems installed. A cultural shift took place. Among investigators, the case became infamous for its brilliance of planning, its brutality, and its continued impunity. It remains a symbol of hidden evil within the seeming safety of suburbia. Today, the case remains officially unsolved. A reward of $1 million was offered in April 2016 for information leading to a conviction. Although no arrest has been made, the file remains open. Cold case detectives occasionally review fresh leads, and the memory of the victims remains alive. One former investigator noted that even if Mr. Cruel is deceased, his crimes are still capable of generating fear and unanswered questions. In the decades since those attacks, law enforcement has changed. Forensic science has improved, digital evidence has become central, and databases allow for cross-jurisdictional cooperation. Yet despite these advancements, the core crime remains unsolved. A reminder that even the most methodical murderer can evade capture if they stay several steps ahead. As the years pass, the suburb streets may look peaceful, and the homes may appear safe. But for the families of those young girls who were abducted, for the investigators who chased shadows, and for the community that believed innocence could last forever, the terror lingers. They were taken from their homes at night, stripped of freedom, and the person responsible remains at large. And the nightmare continues. The disappearance of Marion Barter, Gold Coast, Queensland, 1997. On the 22nd of June 1997, 51-year-old schoolteacher Marion Barter was last seen at the Southport bus terminal on Queensland's Gold Coast. She told friends she was heading overseas to start a new life in the United Kingdom. Weeks later, she vanished. Her passport was used to re-enter Australia under a different name. Large sums of money were withdrawn from her bank account, and a man with a history of aliases emerged at the center of the mystery. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Marion was intelligent, independent, and spontaneous. She had been a respected teacher for nearly 3 decades and was well known in her community for her warmth and energy. But during the months leading up to her disappearance, she began making a series of sudden, puzzling choices. In early 1997, she sold her Southport home for significantly less than its market value and resigned from her teaching position, telling colleagues she planned to travel and perhaps work overseas. In May 1997, she legally changed her name to Florabella Natalia Marion Remakel, though she kept this secret from family and friends. She obtained a new passport under that name, and on 22nd of June she left her car at a Southport service station, was seen driving away with an unidentified man, and later boarded a coach toward Brisbane Airport. She called her family once after arriving in England, phoning from a payphone in Tunbridge Wells on the 1st of August 1997. She said she was well and looking forward to the months ahead. 2 days later, her passport, under the name Remakel, was recorded re-entering Australia through Brisbane Airport. The immigration card listed her as married and living in Luxembourg. After that, all contact stopped. By October, when Marion failed to wish her son a happy birthday, her daughter Sally Layden grew alarmed. She began calling banks and government agencies for answers. The results were deeply unsettling. Between August and September, roughly $80,000 had been withdrawn from Marion's accounts in northern New South Wales in a series of daily ATM transactions limited to $5,000 each. Security footage was unavailable, leaving no proof of who made those withdrawals. Sally then discovered that her mother's passport had re-entered the country, even though no one had seen or heard from her since that phone call from England. There were no records of new employment, no housing, and no phone bills or medical activity under either name. Despite these red flags, authorities initially assumed she had chosen to disappear. For years, the case sat largely dormant. In 2009, a detective reviewing historical files uncovered the key anomalies: the legal name change, the suspicious bank withdrawals, and the re-entry under Remakel. The puzzle suddenly pointed toward deception and possible foul play. By the mid-2010s, public attention began to build again, driven by Sally's persistence and a popular investigative podcast titled The Lady Vanishes, which drew millions of listeners. The podcast's findings pushed police to reopen the investigation formally and triggered a coronial inquest. As the inquiry unfolded, one name surfaced repeatedly: Rick Blum, a Belgian-born man also known by the surname Remakel, and several other aliases. Blum admitted meeting Marion in 1997 after corresponding through personal ads. He also acknowledged using the Remakel name in his own dealings. Investigators discovered a pattern of romantic relationships in which Blum gained trust, borrowed or obtained money, and disappeared. The coroner later found that Marion's name change matched Blum's alias and concluded that she most likely did so at his suggestion. During hearings, Blum denied any involvement in her disappearance, but evidence presented to the inquest showed he had used multiple identities across Australia and Europe and had links to other women who later went missing or were defrauded. Police described him as a con artist with a lifetime of deception. No charges, however, have been filed. The 2024 Queensland State Coroner's findings formally declared that Marion Barter is deceased, likely dying shortly after re-entering Australia in 1997. The cause, place, and manner of death remain undetermined. The coroner was sharply critical of the initial police response, calling early investigations inadequate and noting that the case had been wrongly closed in 2011 after being misclassified as a voluntary disappearance. In 2021, New South Wales Police offered a $250,000 reward for information leading to the resolution of the case, later increasing it to $500,000. Detectives from the Homicide Squad's Unsolved Homicide Unit continue to manage the file. The investigation has revealed deep systemic flaws. For more than a decade, crucial evidence was lost, leads were ignored, and Marion's name did not appear on the National Missing Persons Register. Only in 2019, after 2 decades of family pressure, was her disappearance reclassified as suspicious. For Sally Layden, the search has become her life's work. Through tireless campaigning, media appearances, and her podcast, she continues to keep the case alive, not only seeking justice for her mother, but pushing for reform in how police handle adult disappearances. She has said, "I will not stop until I know where my mother is and what happened to her." Today, the story of Marion Barter stands as a haunting example of how a trusted relationship can hide manipulation, and how bureaucracy can fail those left behind. She was a devoted mother, a gifted educator, and a woman searching for something more, but her disappearance became a national lesson in the dangers of deceit. The coroner's finding that Marion was likely killed does not close the case. It renews it. Investigators believe she may have fallen victim to a calculated fraud and possible homicide, but the truth remains buried in secrecy and silence. What began as a dream of adventure ended as one of Australia's most confounding cold cases. She dreamed of a new life in Europe, but someone else had other plans for her identity and her fate. The Somerton Man, Adelaide, South Australia, 1948. On the morning of 1st December 1948, the body of an unidentified man was found slumped against the seawall at Somerton Beach, near Adelaide. He was neatly dressed in a suit and polished shoes, his legs stretched out, his head resting against the rocks. There were no signs of violence, no identification, and every clothing label had been carefully cut away. A passerby named John Lyons, out for a morning walk with his wife, first noticed the man lying there. At 6:30 a.m., when the figure hadn't moved, Lyons approached and realized he was dead. Police quickly arrived, and the discovery baffled them. The man appeared around 45 years old, in good physical condition, and unusually well-groomed. In his pockets were mundane but oddly selected items: a bus ticket to Glenelg, an unused train ticket to Henley Beach, a half-smoked cigarette, chewing gum, a box of matches, and a metal comb. There was no wallet, no hat, and no clue to who he was. At the autopsy, toxicologists suspected poisoning, possibly from digitalis or another cardiac drug that leaves few traces, yet they found no definitive chemical evidence. The cause of death remained unascertained. He had not been robbed. His stomach contained only a meat pasty. Everything about him suggested intention and control. 2 weeks later, detectives searching Adelaide railway station uncovered a brown suitcase left in the cloakroom since the night before the body was found. Inside were clothes marked with the names T. Keane and Keane, an electrician's screwdriver, scissors, a table knife ground into a sharp point, an orange thread of American manufacture, the same type used to repair a pocket in the man's trousers. Investigators concluded the suitcase was his, but the Keane labels led nowhere. No missing person named Keane matched the man's description, the Melbourne. Labels again had mostly been removed. Whoever he was, he had gone to great lengths to conceal his identity. For months, police followed dead ends. Local dentists, military records, shipping logs, all failed to identify him. Then, in July 1949, a new clue emerged. A Glenelg man handed police a copy of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam he'd found discarded on the back seat of his car. From that book, a torn scrap of paper had been ripped, the same scrap found hidden in the dead man's pocket, bearing 2 Persian words, Tamam Shud, it is finished. Indented impressions on the back page revealed a series of capital letters forming an apparent code and a telephone number. The number belonged to Jessica Thompson, a young nurse living only a few hundred meters from where the body had been discovered. When questioned, Thompson denied knowing the man, but appeared visibly shaken when shown his plaster cast. Detectives later learned she had once owned a copy of the Rubaiyat, and that her close friend Alf Boxall, a former army officer, had been given a copy inscribed by her. For years, rumors spread that the dead man might have been Boxall or a spy linked to him, until Boxall turned up alive and well in Sydney with his copy of the book intact. The code found in the Rubaiyat was studied by naval cryptographers and intelligence analysts but never definitively deciphered. Some believe it concealed initials. Others see it as a random sequence. A dead man's final note that revealed nothing. By 1950, speculation ran wild. The Cold War had begun, and espionage dominated headlines. Adelaide housed a secret radar testing facility, and nearby Woomera was a weapons research site, fertile ground for spy theories. Some argued the man was an agent eliminated by poison, others that he was a heartbroken lover who took his own life. Yet nothing fit neatly. He carried no money, no papers, and appeared neither destitute nor transient. His hands showed no sign of manual labor. His calves were strong, suggesting athletic training, possibly dancing or military life. Still, no one came forward to claim him. When the body was buried in June 1949, under the simple inscription, "Here lies the unknown man found at Somerton Beach," detectives placed a small metal box containing a strand of hair inside the coffin, in hope that one day science might catch up. That hope finally materialized more than 70 years later. In October 2019, South Australian police exhumed the body to extract DNA. Scientists at the University of Adelaide worked for years to isolate viable genetic material from hairs preserved in a death mask created in 1949. In July 2022, researcher Professor Derek Abbott and U.S. genealogist Colleen Fitzpatrick announced a breakthrough. Using advanced genealogical DNA analysis, they identified the Somerton Man as Carl Charles Webb, born in 1905 in Melbourne. Webb was an electrical engineer and instrument maker who had separated from his wife in 1947 and had family connections in Adelaide. Police acknowledged the result, but said the official investigation remained open pending formal confirmation. While the DNA finally gave the unknown man a name, it solved only part of the mystery. Why had Carl Webb traveled to Adelaide? Why were the clothing labels removed? And what led to his death on that cold December night? The Somerton Man case endures as Australia's most famous cold case, combining elements of romance, espionage, and unanswered science. To this day, the precise cause of death is unproven. The coded message has never been cracked, and the connection between Webb and nurse Jessica Thompson, if any, remains uncertain. Some researchers believe it was a tragic suicide. Others insist there are deeper secrets hidden beneath decades of silence. For forensic experts, the case symbolizes both progress and limitation, proof that even in an age of genetic mapping, motive can still elude us. More than 75 years later, the man once buried as unknown finally has a name, but not a story we fully understand. On Somerton Beach, a simple headstone still marks his grave, a reminder that closure in true crime rarely comes neatly wrapped. He died with no name, no ID, and one final message: it is finished. But was it really? Decades have passed, and yet these names still echo across Australia. The Beaumont Children, who vanished from a summer beach in 1966. Marianne Schmidt and Christine Sharrock, whose lives were stolen in the dunes of Wanda Beach. The shadowy figure known as Mr. Cruel, who terrorized families through fear and silence. Marion Barter, the teacher who chased a new beginning and disappeared into someone else's deception. And the Somerton Man, found lifeless on a beach, his identity erased, his final words: "It is finished." Each story reminds us how fragile truth can be, how a single unanswered question can outlive generations. For every theory, every headline, and every breakthrough, the same mystery remains. What really happened? and why. If you've made it this far, thank you. We want to know what you think. Which of these cases do you believe will finally be solved? Share your thoughts in the comments below, your theories, your insights, or even your memories if you lived through these times. And if you want more real Australian true crime stories, the ones that still keep investigators, journalists, and families awake at night, make sure you subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and join us as we uncover the truth behind the next mystery. Until then, stay curious, stay cautious, and never stop asking questions.